Hello, it's me, Gleb Alexandrov for CreativeShrimp.com. In this very exciting tutorial, we'll explore an important aspect of 3D lighting and a simple technique which could be used to make the mundane 3D renders look interesting. Look at these renders of ours. What do you see? What technique is used again and again in each one of these, and quite shamelessly? This software is pure ref, by the way, that I use for storing the references. So the lighting detail that makes these renders arguably pretty eye-catching, in addition to some other stuff, is the light leak, or the area or areas of higher intensity blasted with light, usually imitating the sunlight or something strong. You can see it in pretty much every render presented here. It's that simple, really. This method is often used in cinematography as well, of course. You know, I love referencing cinematography. So this is from the Wandering DP YouTube channel. Let me add it clearly. Basically, what makes all these shots interesting, and otherwise they would have been quite mundane, are these streaks of light. In other words, the contrast of light and dark sprinkled across the frame, or concentrated in certain areas. Like literally in every frame of this commercial, you can see this technique used again and again. Patrick, the author of that channel, aptly calls it a little bit of light and a lot of darkness. Now actually, here's a quick preamble about the model we'll be using in this video. This model is called 3 Maharajas by Reverse Imagineering. We bought it on Sketchfab. It is an incredible photo scale indeed. As it's a paid model though, unfortunately we couldn't share it though. That being said, it actually inspired us to start sketching out our very own ancient wall model, complete with bas-reliefs and other such stuff. A long story short, we recorded this process and it will become our next video course, the one covering a complete workflow of creating highly detailed game-ready assets without ever leaving Blender. From blocking out to high-resolution sculpting, PBR materials, and then optimizing, baking textures, and more. The full 3D asset creation pipeline basically, so stay tuned. And feel free to subscribe if you want to get notified as soon as it hits the shelves. For now though, let's get back to our lighting technique. So imagine we've been given this scene in Blender and we need to make the mundane interesting. Not that this model is mundane. It's quite fascinating, but the lighting is pretty flat right now. I'm using cycles with some denoising for rendering it out on my GPU. Okay, so currently it's just the ambient light within the world environment, and as such it doesn't paint a very interesting picture. Usually we want some more contrast to add some visual interest to it, just like in the references we've just seen. So what we can do is kill the ambience and see how we can add that a little bit of light in that darkness. One cool little trick, and very easy to do, is just use the area lights. I use this technique so often, really. First of all, if the story allows for it, it could be sort of a dappled light scenario. You know, either a nighttime or some sort of a dungeon with the light leaking through the roof or something. So that's the easiest, the most straightforward thing we can do. And that is already pretty cool, because of the fall-off and because of the light versus dark contrast. That being said, I'm gonna do something a bit different though. Alright, so let me place it like this, at an angle. Then in the light settings, in addition to the power and the size or softness, there's the spread, which is how widely the emitted light fans out. Or you can think of it as reducing it makes the light rays go in parallel like the sunlight, focusing it and making it appear like it's shining from far away. And this is a godsend setting if you want to add pools of light. We can scale the light source to change the size of that pool. It's as easy as that. Or we can change the size in the settings. You see, it makes it really easy to control that spot. What I usually do is I change the pivot point mode to 3D cursor, so then we can just shift right click to throw the cursor onto that geometry, and then dot to bring up that menu, and now we can orbit the light around the cursor. RR to rotate the trackball style, and just orbit it around that point. For me it makes perfect sense to manipulate light like that. I wouldn't guarantee it would work for everyone. But yeah, now we are making the mundane interesting. By creating that slash of light, we are basically making it 100 times more eye-catching. As simple as that. Then the spread can be adjusted if you want it to be a little bit softer. I'll keep it nice and tight though. Okay, then we can play with the angle to get the most interesting shape out of this light. Basically, the 2D shape it paints on the geometry. There's a pretty cool shortcut, Shift-T to track light to cursor interactively. A bit of an obscure functionality of Blender, I guess. But yeah, you'll see that some shapes painted with light are somehow more interesting than some other shapes. Yes, I guess it's pretty subjective, but it's also true at the same time. Because what? Because the formal composition matters. This technique leaves some leeway as for choosing the direction. The frontal directions are entirely possible, even though usually it makes it look a bit flat. But because there's just a little bit of light and the rest of it is pretty much darkness, it works pretty well. I still prefer to angle the lights though, so they can cast their shadows towards us. What else? You can change the light size and the light shape here to make it a disc or an ellipse or whatever. It doesn't matter much in this particular case, but it kind of becomes the shape of the opening through which the light is leaking through, as if. Then again, to add some softness to it, you can open up the spread touch. That's what you can do if you like this look more. Another pretty cool thing that we can do with such setups is making the light really hot, and I mean it. Like, how hot can we make it, please? Yes, we can make it really hot, so it emits a lot of secondary light bounces in cycles. Now, if we add some color to it, these ambient light bounces will also inherit this color, which is pretty cool. In addition to that main hotspot, we've got that secondary illumination that helps to smooth out the gradients, and it just looks sleek. It's another contrast to think of it, the contrast of harshness and smoothness. A lovely thing about creating the pools of light like this is that by doing that, we can essentially create new sources of light right within the environment. Let's say if this was our character and we wanted to light it beautifully, with some sort of a soft light, we wouldn't have been able to place an area light there just near the wall. It would have been totally unmotivated, how should I put it? Now we've just painted that light source or light spot right on the wall in plain sight. We painted it with another light, and that's cool. A little bit like in this scene. Do you want to see a breakdown, by the way? Anyway, well, the main reason for this light is to play with the tonal contrast and make it look interesting and so on. The secondary benefit is that each pool of light becomes an area light of its own. And using the global illumination in Blender, Godot, Unreal, Unity or elsewhere, we can light other things, creating the soft boxes at will where the light from that main source hits the environment, if that makes sense. So if there was a character or something in that environment, and we wanted to push some light from the backside onto that character, this is Nick by the way, we could actually do it. We could actually push that soft light onto that character from the direction that would be totally unmotivated and even impossible to use if not for this technique. Okay, now let me show you something else that we can do with the area lights, a slightly different take on this technique. What we can also do to create pools of light is basically add the area light that would illuminate the entire scene more or less. Like that. Where is my coffee? Now let's make it much brighter. Okay. For this one we'll need the custom nodes. So I'm gonna activate it here. Or actually we can do it in the shader editor, which becomes the light editor if you think of it. Use nodes can be ticked from there too, actually. Don't forget this checkbox. The thing is that the emission strength or color can use a texture. So what I'm going to do is select the emission shader, then press Ctrl T to add these 3 nodes, then X to delete this one, and replace it with the noise texture, while restoring the connections. It can go into the color, actually. And now what we can do, or rather need to do, is use the reflection vector. That's the secret ingredient to make it work. I bet my morning coffee that some of you folks didn't know about that. That's another reason to support us on Patreon. Anyway, so that makes area lights actually work with custom light textures. And now we can play with the settings of the noise texture. what I'm going to do is double the scale to make the pattern slightly more frequent. Can I put it like that? And right away I will add the color ramp node. The interesting part is that we can really start fine-tuning the contrast and the color. So I'll compact the ramp like that to make it go light to dark to light to dark. To see it clearer, I'll extinguish the world shader. The choice of words. So it's just this pattern. So you can see how it made this light more broken up and ultimately more engaging. Then you can shift its coordinates to art direct it a little bit. Maybe change the scale or other parameters of the noise. Once again, it's where subjective feeling takes the wheel. Ultimately, I just want a little bit of light and a lot of darkness, and there are various ways to achieve that. I think that looks pretty interesting. Okay, now Control-click adds a stop on the color ramp, and we can probably add some color to that darker stop, like a blue tinge, and some green for that second one. Why not? And this one can remain pretty neutral. Okay, here's a quick tip. A color can have a value higher than 1. We can make it work, you may say, in the wide luminosity range. The term high dynamic range doesn't really mean anything. So we can make it really hot. Let this be the takeaway tip from this video. The colors can be powerful. So we've added a lot of contrast by doing that. That looks good. Usually when you can't backlight things, then playing with contrasts become quite important. And we can't do it here, I mean backlighting, because there's the wall blocking all the light coming from behind naturally. So this pattern is how we can make it look interesting. We can make it even more powerful, I think. And maybe warm it up as well, so it looks like sunlight. Then when creating double light, we can obviously use more than one light. I'll Shift D to duplicate this one, and we've got another dappled source. When I do stuff like that, I usually tweak each light individually. I mean the material, the placement obviously, but the material as well. Actually, I think it will be easier if we isolate that light to work on it separately. Where's my coffee? Still searching for the pattern. By the way, if you wish, you can switch it to the 4-dimensional mode and adjust the W, or you can say the evolution of the noise pattern. Oh, that looks appetizing. The whole point is to make the ball ring look interesting. It's never too late to shift the colors a bit. Who knows, maybe you would want to see more of a grassy green to show through, as if we are in a jungle or whatever. The lights can suggest the environment, of course, blah blah blah. Well, we could have stopped here, but I'll duplicate it once more. Swoosh. And this time I'll change its brightest color ever so slightly. And actually one more trick we can try is to come over to the light settings and change the size of that light to see if it would look nicer that way. If we sharpen it up a bit, I mean, that will make the harsher bit of sunlight appear. And I think it actually looks even better now. Even more places for the eye to travel to, and ultimately a good looking contrasty lighting. So that's it, that's the technique. It's lovely that you watched till the end, I really appreciate that. To quickly recap, in this video we explored a lighting technique that uses pools of light or light leaks to create extra contrast, turning an otherwise flat-looking scene into something visually captivating and engaging. Again, quite unexpectedly for us, we found ourselves working on a new course, on a new series of videos involving modeling, texturing, creating PBR materials, then optimizing it for game engine, the ancient wall similar to this 3 Maharajas photoscan model, but created from scratch instead, without ever leaving Blender. You see, inspiration works in mysterious ways. More updates are coming soon. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay in the loop.